Welcome back to the Disaster Tough podcast. I'm your host, John Scardena. I am so excited for this episode. I think it was about 3 years ago. I had this incredible firefighter out of New York named Doug Bainton on the podcast. He has been, all things collaboration for the city, for fire, for kind of really interagency coordination. In fact, his title now is Citywide Interagency Coordinator. He really focuses on the Manhattan area. There were so many different responses in New York City, as you can imagine, big city, big things happening every year, that the lessons learned, the things that he was addressing, I thought it'd be phenomenal to say, hey, during 2023, you're doing so many different things. Let's have you come back on the show. Let's talk about interagency coordination. We all need to get better at it. This guy is just nailing it on like upper levels, next level kind of stuff. It really helps the fact that because of his tactician background as a firefighter and learning the skill set of emergency management, that strategic coordination piece, he is really able to see in really a special way all things from the ground level all the way through the top. And I just have the utmost respect for him and for what he's doing. And I thought, you know what, again, we need to have him on the show. So without any further ado, Doug, welcome back to the podcast.
Hey, John, appreciate you for having me on. Thank you so much.
You know what? You have done so many cool things, and we could talk about this. We were just talking even before the podcast about doing a series, but just for like 2023, I'm going to highlight a couple things. I'm sure you have a lot more things you want to highlight. I want to talk about the crane disaster that happened. I want to talk about the garage collapse. I think there was a refugee issue. There's been hospital issues. There's been all kinds of things that happen in the city. And with so much complexity within that city, so many different agencies from the city level all the way through federal, that beast just has to be so much to manage. And so if you could just very quickly, and I want to dive into each one of these, but just talk about, because it's been like about 3 years, your specific role and maybe like the high level, what you see most important within your role.
Sure. So like you said, I'm a citywide interagency coordinator. One of many. We have a whole unit in our field response and our bureau in New York City Emergency Management. And I'm the lead coordinator for Manhattan, like you said. So that's primarily where I spend most of my time. But yeah, citywide, we see everything you can imagine. A lot of people follow us all over because if it happens, it probably happens here. My primary role as an interagency coordinator is to support the incident commander with the floor resources of New York City. It's put it very, very basically, right? And the way we do that primarily is we show up and we have to look at things from that 10 to 30,000 foot view and see how can I help the incident commander with any of the things that they're not able to do, they're not seeing right now. I'm trying to think ahead, I'm looking at the end and trying to reverse engineer this problem and try to help them get ahead of it. So what goes a long way is, and you and I were talking about this, is deploying empathy, right? Come into this where I'm not another body with something to say. My job is to support. So when you come in and you tell whoever's in charge of this chaos and you let them know that someone's legit here to help and I've got options for you, that makes a huge difference. And that's something that I think, worldwide, our field could really do better at. Well, everybody seems to have once they're 30 seconds of fame type of thing, and it's really not about us. It's about helping. So, we see, like you said, collapses. We respond to multiple alarm fires. We respond to infrastructure issues, and everything is different. There are no routine type of jobs. A gas leak is not a gas leak. A fire is not a fire. We just had a major collapse in the Bronx yesterday.
The L3 Harris Extreme 400p radio solves problems and is specifically designed for emergency services. How do we know? We field tested it with medical, urban search and rescue, and collapse and confined structures. This radio is amazingly tough. Check out the L3 Harris Extreme 400p radio at l3harris.com right now. If you served in the military, you've probably worn Proper Apparel. Proper Apparel is now reaching out to first responders and those who love the outdoors. Check out Proper Apparel. From the outdoors to the EOC, wear proper. How do you spell Doberman Emergency Management? EOP, OEP, HVA, HMP, Thyra, TTX, Drone, PDA. Whenever you need an expert, Doberman Emergency Management field experts are there for support. Contact an expert at DobermanEMG.com today.
None of these things are really truly alike, and
Yeah.
have to approach them differently each time. But yeah, it's been a real busy year. In addition to, like you said, the collapses and the crane, we had a shark attack that led to drone monitoring.
Which is wild, by the way. You're like, hey, by the way, I'm running these drones and I'm just going to look for some. Like, you literally had your drone up in the air because you're a 107 pilot for New York, and you were actually flying over the water looking for sharks.
Yeah, our unit we have a drone unit in field response, and we work with the FDNY robotics unit very closely. And, that team is really good at what they do. And yeah, we were monitoring the waters because, we couldn't really tell why anything happens. Sharks attack for whatever reason they attack. And we did that for a bit. E-bikes are a real big thing for us. Lithium-ion batteries. You can't walk anywhere in Manhattan without almost getting run over by a delivery e-bike. It's, it's nuts.
Well, that's the thing, right? Like, New York City, because you have so many things, like, it is, at least in my limited experience with like dealing with big cities, everywhere I go, you can immediately tell people who have been in responses from an emergency management perspective or otherwise, who've actually done the job, and people who haven't. And like when the e-bikes run into each other, you think like the whole world just like blew up, because and you're standing there, and I can see you just like, what are you talking about? Like, let's just.
In the grand scheme of things, this is not the biggest thing.
Yeah, and
it's
so
important, but it's not.
Of course, it's important, but at the same time, you don't have to lose it, right? And so,
and emergency management, the industry has grown tremendously just in the last. I've been involved in emergency management for about 18 years, most of my career, in one way or another, and the last 4.5 years directly for New York City emergency management. So, when you find folks who have never really, they've seen an emergency on TV, but they've never responded to one. They've never had an actual job at one, not even just in the first responder realm, but, the operations folks in the utility companies who have to go to those scenes and fix a problem. Yeah. Any of that. If you've never experienced that, it's just naturally going to be harder for you to have that basic understanding of what a true emergency really is. And I find that, it's hard to explain sometimes. And for me, I've had to learn how to not get immediately like, really, I have to deploy that empathy and understand that they're trying to learn, and I want them to be better at what they're doing so that we can support each other. And, it is tough when you haven't done that to go and coordinate this and work with somebody who has no idea what you're talking about, and they've never done it, and the things that they're prioritizing and what you're seeing don't align.
Yeah.
It's a challenge sometimes.
Well, that's your job. Going back to the original point of like just showing up, even if the person's never done the job before. And I see one of two things typically happen, and it's always around stress, by the way, and really anxiety, but it manifests itself in totally two different ways. One, they just completely break down. It's chaos. Like they can't think. It's overwhelming. And to their credit, it's the first time, of course, like that's what's going to happen. And it doesn't need to be the end of the world stuff, but that's just kind of what happens because they don't know what to do. The other thing is another manifestation of anxiety sometimes is incredible arrogance. They don't want to listen to people who've done it because they're afraid that it will expose them for I want to say for fraud, but they'll realize like, I don't want to take the advice. I want to show that I can do this. But if you just go in there and you're like, hey, I'm not all about that. I'm not trying to take this away from you, or I'm not trying to embarrass you. I'm just here to help.
There's humility.
You have so many things on your plate, and not every idea is about life and death. Some ideas are better or worse, and we can just roll with those punches too, right?
Absolutely. Every time. When somebody, comes at you humble, hey, I have no idea what you got going on, but if there's anything I can do, please let me know. And you know what? I've had plenty of times where I'm like, hey, I need you to type up my notes for me because I have to run an interagency meeting in 10 minutes, and I'm the only one here type of thing, And we're fortunate in New York City where our response unit has a bunch of members of service who do just what I do. So we automatically have kind of a very basic level understanding of there is no questioning. Hey, I need you to do this. There's no rank. There's no time on the job. I got here before you. There's none of that. This is your job. I'm here to help. That's it. End of story. What do you need? You need me to type an email? You need me to make a phone call? You need me to get on the radio? You need me to go corral those 14 people that are siloed over on that corner because they're the key player in this? Whatever it is, that's our job.
You remind me perfectly of somebody like, so the secret sauce here that I'm sharing on the podcast, but don't worry, anybody, you're not going to see this anytime soon. I've been like kind of writing a book of like what all, like if I had to describe the entire scope of emergency management, I'm up to 14 chapters, by the way.
Wow.
So, yeah, I'm like tired of like talking about standards without actually like suggesting them. Like, fine, I'm going to provide the solution. People can agree or disagree. But if I had to like think of like you and like what you've done for New York City and probably the field overall, it's like this perfect combination of innovation and grit. Like you have to have that, like, I can step into this disaster and still think, but you have to be able to think outside the box too, right?
That's primarily where I live. You know,
Yeah, exactly. I'm telling you, you are. Maybe we'll just put your picture on the front of that book. Like this is
well known for anybody who knows me real well knows. You know, I'm kind of a disruptor. You know, I like to study the rules so that I can bend them as far as they'll go.
Yeah.
Before they break. You know, to get the job done, and that's not because I just enjoy being a pain in someone's butt. Sometimes, but most times, I know that you have to be able to find 14 different ways to do this because the first 10 are probably not going to work. You have to have plan A through G at least, you know, and I really enjoy that because it keeps me thinking, and other people will ask me, how did you come to that conclusion? That's insane. And I'm like, that's why it's probably going to work, you know?
Yeah.
What happens when you start to do that though, is you get the folks who are really concerned about optics, and I get it. Optics, that's, you know, I get that from the strategy level all the time, especially when those folks who are dealing with the politics. I know you need it to look good, but I need it to work, and we need to find the medium for that, you know. And when I have someone who's never done it telling me what it needs to look like, and I'm telling them we can't do it that way, and here's why, but I have a solution, and you know, we're wasting time, you know.
Yeah.
We're not solving the problem anymore. We're focused on image and Instagram. We're not worried about actually helping the people who are impacted by this thing. And I see that happening all over LinkedIn. I watch the articles some folks write and the way they're handling things. And I'm like, we've kind of gone off the rails with helping people and getting the problem solved.
Yeah.
We're not fixing anything, you know?
I 100% agree. Messaging is so incredibly important. I've talked about it. I mean, I run a podcast, right? But it's like, to what end? Right. If you're, I call them disaster tourists, people who go in there for like a week, and there was one story I'm trying to recall. Basically, I think he was a planning section chief. He had just deployed to a disaster, and I saw him literally on the next day on Facebook, like with like pictures of him on a beach,
right?
Because the disaster was on an island, and I was like, what are you doing? Like, he wanted the picture of him on the beach with the destruction in the background.
Don't post
I would have been in an EOC for 18 hours. I want to have known like what time of day it was, right? And I'm not trying to say I was better than that guy or anything, but I am better than that guy. But the reality is just like, you know, messaging is important because we have to be able to communicate with the public and with stakeholders to get things done.
Right.
Verbatim. You have to do that. But what's more concerning to me is that because of a continual scope creep, and because of, again, that optics perspective and getting away from the meaning of optics, it's slowing down response. If everybody was more focused on doing the right thing for the right reason, the optics would line up much better. It'd be easier to do the storytelling.
It'd be basically automatic.
Yeah, it would be automatic, right?
People need to understand that not every solution is pretty. You can't put a bow on everything. You just
I talked to
hard. That's why we're in that direction. You know, not everything is pretty. These are disasters. They're ugly by nature.
Yeah, that's why they're called a disaster.
And the fix is not always going to be pretty, but if it works, and what I find is it's interesting because like I said, I watch a lot of podcasts and people talking about these things all over the country, and people tend to talk about, we don't want the people to think this, or we don't want that, and in my experience, the people want the stuff fixed, and they basically understand that it's already ugly. So if all you have to do is X to get it done, please do it.
Yeah. Well,
we talk about that's what they want. They want solutions. They don't care what it looks like on LinkedIn.
I need you to talk to this guy. I had him on the podcast a couple of weeks ago. You said you listen to podcasts. Which one is your favorite, by the way?
Disaster Tough.
There you go. That was the right answer.
That's the only.
A couple of weeks ago, I had the director of the National Center of Urban Operations on the podcast, or a think tank based out of New York City. I think they were all operators. I know he was.
Right.
And they talked about like this combination of innovation and grit and just getting things done. And I need to look you guys up. I think because he's asking about EM, and I think it'd be a good thing. I think they're having some kind of meeting in like April.
Okay.
And I'm showing up, so you should show up too. But
hey, we just want to do a quick pause X to thank our sponsors, L3 Harris, Proper, Paladin by Acela, Impulse, Doberman Emergency Management, and especially all of you who have been donating to our podcast. Thank you for helping us boost the signal. All right, let's jump back in.
You're talking about innovation and grit, and just thinking out the box and bending the rules, but not breaking them, and not knowing what the rules actually are. I think that's all fantastic information. I have a new sponsor, Acela. Have you heard of Acela before?
Yeah, they do the Paladin mobile morgues, and the I think they do what do they do? Custom chassis, I think too.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, perfect. Yeah, great company. And they were telling me about a story working with the VA during COVID, and they're a small company. They do really amazing things, but they're based out of Montana, and the VA calls them up and says, "Hey, we have this massive problem right now with hospitals and morgues, and we got to figure these things out right now. And there's not really a great solution for them." And you're talking about almost overnight, starting to run 24-hour ops, building something customized for the VA to mitigate a huge issue. And you're talking about people who know the rules I think in some places they were still using like wood to store the bodies. Well, decomposing bodies and storing on wood, bad idea.
Yeah.
And so they knew the rules, they knew the metal, they knew how to like make things safe. And like literally within a week they started pumping these things out all over the country. That's people with a lot of grit, by the way, and a lot of innovation during a disaster without freaking out.
Yeah, they were very proactive in the way they handled it.
Absolutely. And so, like, if we're going to be talking about that kind of skill set for emergency managers, whether it's people like Chris, who's on the podcast, or like you, or like Acela, or like, gosh, I could just name so many people who've been on this podcast even, who have that somehow that skill set, that mix of innovation and grit. Do you think that is inherent to your personality, or do you think you've had to learn that skill, or were there incidents that you were like, if I don't do this now, we fail? Is there a mix for you? Like, how does that?
It's a mix. I think personality has a lot to do with it. Ever since I was young, I was never afraid to just try something that didn't make sense to anyone else. And honestly, I took a lesson from my mom. My mom always told me, you could be a leader or a follower, and I ran with it a little bit. And like I said, anyone who knows me real well knows that if everyone's going in one direction, I'm going to go at least 10 to 90 degrees to the other direction, just because.
Why do we do that? I naturally do that. I don't know.
I don't like, because, one of my favorite quotes was, if everyone in a room is thinking the same, someone's not thinking, and I don't like that. I don't like the hive mind. I don't like groupthink. I've never wanted to be one of the crowd. That doesn't mean I want to be somebody who's standing out, because I really don't.
Yes, I know exactly what you mean.
What I found is that, fortunately or unfortunately, depending on how you look at it, by doing that, I've tended to stand out anyway. Yeah. So I become this different way of thinking, and people have come to me with questions and my opinion on things that I would have never expected anyone to look at me for. But it's because I have a different perspective. I'm not afraid to say what I think. And anyone who knows me knows that well. Fairly colorful in my language sometimes about it, depending on how passionate I am about that particular topic.
Yeah.
And honestly, to my knowledge, that's become an attractive thing to the point where I was almost like, I should stop doing this because too many people are reaching out to me now. But at the same time, I want to help. And that guides me that's what keeps me going, is that I do enjoy helping people. And even when things don't make sense or they're irritating me, I'm still going to go in my direction no matter what anybody says, but I think it's a combination of both. And my skills have developed by my experiences. I was a 911 dispatcher before I got on the job. I was in the military. I've been an EMT before I got on the job. I've been a firefighter, a disaster response, and now emergency management, drone pilot, all those things. And then meeting all the people within those realms. And obviously, anyone who knows me knows I talk a lot, and I can talk paint off the wall. So that's how you learn, and I've taken all that and I absorb it, and I just try to grab the tidbits, and it serves me well in the field, because I can recognize when someone's struggling a little bit to figure out how to solve a problem, and like I said, deploy empathy, show me you care and you're here to help and talk it through.
Problem solving is the ability to. Before I actually make that statement, I want to do a quick just reminder for some people who may be listening, thinking like, oh, I always think outside the box, but I always, piss everybody off. There is a difference between being able to think outside the box and be able to articulate that in a different way and be able to understand where it's going, versus not learning the rules, not understanding how things work, just wanting to be combative and just wanting to be different for the sake of being different.
Yeah.
I mean, you literally started off by saying, I want to know all the rules in order to see where I can bend them. And I'm the exact same way. I don't want to get into a situation where I've had to learn to be more patient, to sit back and figure out why people are coming up with the reasons why they're coming to those conclusions, and starting to understand like, oh, they're pulling from this. Sometimes the rules are BS, by the way, but they're pulling from this thought, or they're pulling from that thought, or they're pulling from this, this perspective, or, that book. And if I can figure out all their points of where they connected it, now I feel confident to the point where I can say, okay, like A, B, and C were very important. D, E, F sucked. You don't need to worry about D, E, F. You're wasting your time, right? The exact point of messaging is important, but you can actually do better optics if you just focus on doing what's right instead of overthinking the angle of that Instagram post, right? By the way, our Instagram is phenomenal, so people should follow our Instagram. But I don't know. What are your thoughts on that? Like, how does somebody who's listening right now, it's like, okay, I feel like I'm a problem solver. I feel like I think outside the box, like they're speaking my language, but I can never get people to come to me to do that problem solving. And even worse, senior leadership actively avoids my ideas. How do you
one of the things I've found that I enjoy doing is leading people to their own conclusions and helping them think it's their idea. As a lot of times, like you said, you have to know your audience, right? So for us in my unit, that includes knowing the people you're dealing with, because we deal with some of the same people all the time, and we know their personalities and how they're going to get to the conclusions they're going to get to. And we have to kind of figure out how to work around that and help them get out of their own way sometimes. But also we have to know what their agencies are capable of and what they will and won't do historically, and how to get them to make that decision, and what kind of pressure we have to apply. Do I have to push this up to my direct boss, up to the commissioner of New York City Emergency Management, up to the mayor, and then come back down that direction? Because that's kind of the nuclear option, but it's an option. Like, which way am I going to have to go to get this? And I don't ever want to have to go past the person I'm talking to.
Yeah.
So that's where, like I said, that empathy thing comes into play. Like, I know where we need to go because I've done this for a while, and I have the experience. Maybe this person doesn't. Maybe, like you said, maybe they're just naturally combative, but they're the person I have to deal with, and they're the gatekeeper of. They have the solution.
Yeah.
And now I have to get them to do it. But it's just understanding all of that is so key. And I don't know how people develop that skill set without just getting in there and figuring it out, unfortunately.
Yeah.
We said his personality, I think, has a lot to do. If you're outgoing, it's a lot easier, I think. For the introverts in the crowd, I've seen a lot of the introverts. We have plenty of introverts in my unit. Don't get me wrong. They would rather not be in the spotlight. They don't really want anyone looking at them. They want to just kind of do the job and go home, just nothing else. And I'm very similar. I want to do the job and go home too, but I want to make sure that I don't have to go back again as well. And sometimes that involves getting out of your comfort zone and being that person in the spotlight for a minute, and then getting out, and maybe it doesn't come back then,
Yeah.
But it's really hard to put I've been asked before to try and describe how to think that way, that outside the box. How do you come up with that plan A through G? And I reverse engineer everything in my life. I'm a classic overthinker when it comes to just about everything. That probably helps, and I just think it's life experiences and just a shift in perspective a lot of times, in the way you're looking at this thing, and, why are you thinking the way you're thinking? If you're struggling, I'm a big fan of there's a jerk in every room. If you can't find them, it's probably you, and
I'm in danger of that all the time.
being humble, being able to admit to yourself that maybe I don't know exactly what I'm doing. How bad do I want to do this?
Yeah.
One of my personal struggles in this realm at this point in my career is that I've been to a fair amount of fairly large scale events between all my experiences. And I'm we use the term disaster junkie a lot, right?
Yeah.
Trauma junkie, like in our realm, in the emergency services and even the medical field, and just you're just addicted to that craziness.
Yeah.
And what I found is that, for me personally, one of my struggles in the city is that if it's not a crane collapse or all that, I don't care less if it's not. But I find it harder to manage, it makes no sense. It didn't at first until I really started talking to more people, because I need a plate on every finger. I'm in my zen when I've got a plate on every finger.
Yeah.
And like that crane collapse on 10th Avenue was absolute insanity. And I'm perfectly calm, where I'm looking at maybe a second alarm fire in a vacant building, and I'm just not looking at it the same. I'm handling it. I'm doing what we got to do. I'm getting it done, but I'm not as excited about it. And somebody told me, they said, that's perfectly normal. When you've seen enough stuff, that's just what we do. We're in the disaster business. If there's no disasters, it's, what are you doing?
It is weird though. I think I was talking to Chris about this a little bit, and if you put me into like a major problem, you can call it disaster. Now in business, I deal with those fairly frequently now. Some big thing blows up, the whole world is like plate spin on every finger kind of thing. I'm as cold as ice. I can operate forever under that environment, and I'm totally fine.
Yeah.
And I can think very clearly. And like people are like, "Why are you so calm?" Like I can deal with that. But like if I am, I don't know, working on my truck and a bolt doesn't come off or something, I lose it. I get so angry.
I'm the same. And what? Just tell the car.
Yeah, I'm like, I'm just gonna like blow up this vehicle now. Or like I'll go to the grocery store and they don't have the thing I want. Like internally, externally I'm fine.
Punch a wall because the broccoli's not on sale.
Yes, exactly. Like, oh, I was supposed to get this broccoli.
Yeah.
I can't figure out why. I mean, maybe you have the secret sauce, and I do want to talk about the disasters because I think people are like tuning in for that. But like, I can't figure out why I can deal with the big stuff or just like even complicated, just complicated.
Oh, I'm sure there's a whole psychology about it that we could talk for days about with professionals who understand this stuff.
Yeah, they're like, you need some help. You're like, oh, right.
Probably, yeah, right.
Yeah, well, bro. You know what? I'm actually going to say this because I think I've brought it up once or twice before. Before I was really nervous to tell people, but I have seen a therapist, and I did talk about PTSD, and there's some other stuff too, like from just life that I wanted to deal with, and I've had Like the Pulse nightclub incident commander, he was on here talking about AMDR and therapy and that kind of stuff.
Mm-hmm.
Sometimes it's not a bad idea to like go to somebody and be like, oh yeah, I studied this. There's a million people with the exact same problem. Here's the tool to deal with that. You're like, oh, it's not that big of a deal.
Right.
Like, no, it's not.
We avoid it so long, and because in our heads we build it up to be something it's completely not. But it's really, it's kind of similar to I need to clean my desk. It's driving me nuts, and you spend 3, 4, 5, 7 months not cleaning your desk. You clean your desk, you feel good. It took 10 minutes.
Yeah. Why?
But
why is that?
Now this
I
is
literally had a
logically something, your mental health, something that's physically and mentally affecting you, and your ability to just live normally. And we just, maybe something will fall down. I'll go do that.
It's also, I don't know if it's like a boring thing. I had to change a light for like literally like, I think it was multiple years in my house. There was one light bulb, and I was just like, I'll get to it. Literally took me less than 5 minutes to just like grab the ladder, reach up there.
It's longer to get the ladder and put it away than it did to fix the problem.
Yes, exactly right. It's embarrassing.
Yeah.
And yet, I don't know. The emergency management skill sets that I learned in disaster responses and really just leadership and coordination has made me phenomenal in business. Like when people call like a client and there's some big problem, my staff who are newer to this, sometimes it's kind of a big deal. And I'm like, no, we're still going to do it. Like it's fine. Like just, put your head in the game. And I think that comes from maybe a personality type, but I also think it comes from like, the more time you can spend in the mud, the better. And yeah, I don't even know if it's that. I think it's just learning to be comfortable.
Experience builds it, right?
Yeah. But some people need caffeine. I just need stress, I guess.
Yeah, it's one of the things I struggle with is looking at that person like, why are you freaking out? And I have to keep telling myself, don't do that, But I've gotten better at it. It was really hard for me at first, especially when I got to emergency management in New York City, because I had never really dealt with the number of civilians that I do now. So it's taken me some time and a lot of effort. I've gotten a lot of reward out of that because, it's hard to work with people who are combative, right? We talked about that. So if I'm in the field and I need resources that I don't have, there's somebody on the other end of a phone or an email or a meeting that has them or has the key to them. And if I'm being a jerk to them because I think they're unworthy or they don't know what they're talking about, whatever, that's not helpful.
Sayonara.
You're being a bad human. Just you're being a jerk. Don't do that, But for the job, you're getting nothing done. You're no better than the person in the field who's gatekeeping the answer because they feel like it. That's not what we do for a living.
That's not what we do. Speaking of doing things for a living, we got to talk about some of these cool disasters that we brought up in the beginning. Because you have done a lot of things right. And honestly, it's really impressive. Let's talk about the crane. For those who don't know what happened in New York, I mean, we talked about it a little bit. Can you walk through the actual incident and your role within that incident?
Sure. So we had a tower crane on 10th Avenue, had some mechanical issues, and the jib or the boom, ended up falling to the ground, and the crane itself, the motor area, was on fire. Multiple stories in the air. So the crane's boom on its way down hit the building across the street, did some damage there, landed in the street. So now, 10th Avenue in Manhattan is a major thoroughfare for the city. Thankfully, this happened very early, before everyone was on the street, before traffic was really built up. So, we didn't have what could have been. I mean, it could have been a lot worse. But now, we've got the fire department has to fight this fire up in the air while trying to stay out of the collapse zone, while trying to, evacuate surrounding buildings. We've got NYPD has to do what they do, establishing security in a perimeter and starting to get a handle on that. We've got pretty much every agency you can imagine is now responding to this thing because it's a big deal, right? So now I'm on duty that day and, I'm responding. I'm coming up the West Side Highway and I can see the smoke coming from, the top of a high rise from a distance. And it's just, okay, this is what we got. And I'm listening to the fire radio and it's absolute insanity, the number of units and everything coming in. And, I get there and I see this jib of the crane parts on the ground, leaning against the building. There's fire departments everywhere now. They're operating from the building across the street, trying to put the fire out. Department of Buildings is showing up now. They're going to have to assess the buildings, and then we're just working the job. There's no real, for me, I'm sizing up the scene at this point, just like any of us would do. Like, who's here? What's going on? Where's everybody at in their operations? Who's not here that needs to be? Are they notified? Are they on their way? If not, can we get them? All that. The press, the mayor, all the commissioners are showing up. So it's just absolute mayhem, right? And now I'm the coordinator for the scene. So my job is to go check in with the fire department first. Hey, chief, OEM, what do you got? And here's what we're up to. Here's what we got. Can you do this, this, and this? Got it. I go find that person. Boom, boom, boom. At first, I'm still trying to figure out how big I need to make this job as well. So I'm very comfortable with not having to pull additional resources for us right away because I'm going to build the scene before I start to call everybody in.
Yeah, I love that.
I do like getting as big as you can, as fast as you can in certain situations, but I think that needs to be used with discretion, and you have to use discipline.
You have to be strategic in that, for sure.
Yeah. So we're working this job. I'm starting to get questions like, how many buildings are evacuated? What are the addresses? How many people are evacuated? And my answer is, I don't know, and I can't tell you right now because the fire department can't tell me because they've got so much going on that I need to let them get their battle rhythm going and figure out all this stuff. So basically, I'm giving a perimeter. I talked to NYPD. I said, hey, what do you have closed currently? I got that. Fire department. Where are you operating outside of the putting the fire out? What else you guys got going on? Okay, boom, we're evacuating this building right now. We're going to work this block. Okay, so now I can give kind of a very high-level overview of the scene.
Yeah.
And then I'm starting to plan my first interagency meeting. When am I going to do this? And it's chaos. So you have to be very careful of when you do that because you want everybody to be able to report out. You don't want to be in the way.
Yeah.
Especially when it's like this. You gotta let the job start to run a little bit.
How long was it before you did your first meeting? From the time, roughly?
It was almost 2 hours.
2 hours, yeah.
Because, if you've ever driven in Manhattan, getting to the scene in that section of town, especially when you have that size incident going on, it takes time. And that's just what it is. It can't just helicopter in. It just doesn't work that way. So,
yeah.
But, it takes a little while to get a handle on it. And then we had the first quick meeting. We briefed out. We made sure everybody that we needed was there. And, then we start to smell gas at the scene. Very little whiffs here and there. And multiple people start coming to me saying, hey, do you smell gas? Do you smell gas? And we're like, okay, where's, the utility? So we'll make sure they're there. Hey, yeah, we're aware of it. We're checking it out right now. We'll let you know. That kind of stuff. And then, oh, hey, is electric here? Yeah, they're here. They're operating over there, and they've got some things going on. So they report out at the meeting that they need to fix some things that involve kind of going through the collapse zone, and now it starts to, the injects basically start coming. Our department's still operating. There's a massive collapse potential because we need the cranes unit of the buildings department to come and check this crane out. So we're keeping everybody out of the collapse zone. The collapse zone's huge because this crane is tall. Right. Yeah. So it could go in any direction. So, just all those things in your first meeting. And what I usually do in these incidents is I have my first initial 1 to 3 meetings tend to be a little closer together within 2 hours of each other because the job is changing so fast and you need to keep up with what's going on. And then as it gets stabilized, I spread them out because you want people to be able to do their job. So you're having a meeting every hour. You got to pull the bosses in. You got to pull the operators in. You got to pull everybody in, and they have to stop what they're doing. And you have to have that awareness of how to do that. But it was insane. We had like a lot of moving parts. The building was under construction. So we have the construction company. We have the building that got hit. We have their building ownership there. And, that building's evacuated. Where are all these people going? Thankfully, it was a nice day, and it wasn't 30 degrees and snowing type of deal, because that adds another layer of complexity. How we have to do a reception center. We have to open up, we have to get Red Cross and all this stuff, So that particular job was, I mean, I hate when bad things happen like that, but I love those types of jobs because that's the stuff that really gets my brain fired up. And, I'm on the phone with our leadership, briefing them. A couple of members of my unit came to back me up. Hey, what do you need? Like I said earlier. And it's just, hey, can you please go talk to the utility about X? Got it. Boom, gone. Off they go. And we're trying to, like I said earlier, we're the conductors of this chaos orchestra. That's our job, is to just kind of make sure all the silos are coming together, and there were a lot of them. We had a lot of agencies and individuals and private owners and just all of it. Now we have, the Port Authority bus terminal was right there. The way they get in and out of their area was right there and was now closed off. So now we have their leadership and the police departments from their leadership, and we're all working together to coordinate rerouting traffic, and it's just, played on every finger.
So sounds pretty simple. Sounds like
didn't
even make
sense. In 3 days. Thank you.
Yeah. Hey, I'm thinking off the cuff here, but you know what TRL Insider is, right?
Sure.
That thing we're pushing.
Yep.
One of the reasons why we started was TTXs, like really to help get people to like start thinking like that.
Mm-hmm.
I would love to be able to talk to you offline about like getting the AAR, whatever's public, whatever, and building like another, like a TTX around a crane collapse, because
sure.
that's unique in so many different ways.
Mm-hmm.
And yet you just walk through all the different groups that would be involved with that, and there's complexity with every single one of them, and trying to get them all on board.
They have their own needs, and we need them to work together in lockstep to be able to do it, making sure everybody's safe.
Yeah.
Because at the end of the day, that's the primary goal, right? Is to solve the problem, but we need everybody to go home.
That's exactly right.
We keep that in mind, primarily.
Zach had a TTX in November about a tornado, and we had debated what December was going to be about. And I actually did another tornado from a, funny enough, PIO perspective of tornado, because I have the understanding of December, warm days in December creates tornadoes in the Midwest. And we uploaded it, and like literally we just had tornado outbreaks in Tennessee.
Mm-hmm.
Like the one thing I don't want to do is like all summer next year is just to do like hurricane after hurricane after hurricane. While those are important, I think people I want to do like outside the box, like TTXs. And
I love that idea.
Yeah, I think you'd be kind of perfect.
Well, I also think, we could, what we do in the fire department a lot is, we call it back to basics. Over time in your career and whatever you're doing, all this technology comes in and all these fancy ways of doing things, and it's very common to just kind of forget the basics of, like for us, it would be how to force a door open. That basic Halligan tool of all the different ways to use that tool.
How to open that binder.
How to read that IAP. But whatever it is, I think we get into the weeds and we forget about it, where I think there's a basic skill set that we can develop where it doesn't necessarily matter the hazard. There's a very base level way to approach it, and then you adjust accordingly based on the different parameters you're giving at that scene.
There was a book I read about the Spurs, San Antonio Spurs, who won the NBA championship, and they didn't really have like any. I mean, they had Tim Duncan, that's great, but they didn't really have like kind of like that knockout, whatever. But they kept on beating everybody, and the coach was like, all of our drills are like how to dribble a basketball, like making sure your elbow's right. Like it was like so incredibly basic. They were hosing people. Like if you look at like how they played that season, and one season in particular, they didn't do anything special. They passed it 3 times before they shot it. Like it was like all like really, really basic stuff. They were just so phenomenal at the basics. Like all the other special things didn't really matter.
Right.
The same thing can be true with, I was thinking about something else that was going back to the basics. Oh, Steve Johnson leads counter Seaburn for the British Army.
Okay.
He's been on here, and when he was at DIPOP with us, we were talking about the integration of technologies. And I'm a big fan of technologies. I think technology can enhance our job in so many different ways and automate, whatever. At the same time, he was talking about, because he's worked a lot between the U.S. and England, And in the military perspective in the U.S. is if there's a new technology, you train to the technology. In the UK, they still teach them how to do it without the technology first. And once they master it, then they introduce the technology and shows them how the technology enhances their job.
Right.
And
Well, it's like us with thermal imaging, it's just a tool. You still got to be able to search with your eyes closed, basically not being able to see. You have to have that basic ability.
yeah, exactly. And so that's exactly what you're saying. Like, how do we get back to the basics? Getting back to the basics for emergency management is realize emergency management is for emergencies.
Right.
And everything we're trying to do is to stop the emergency, responding to the emergency, and overcoming the emergency when it happens. And it's really that basic. And I don't know why we've added, the billion layers to it, but they're basic concepts that can have dramatic impact around the complexity of the incident itself.
Right. Yeah, because you could plan all day. I mean, you and I go back and forth.
I love planning. Yeah, you're an operator.
Planning and ops, it's funny because I'm one of those people like I like the IEP. I get the IEP. If it's more than 6 pages, I'm probably not going to read it though. I've been to incidents around the country with book-sized IEPs, and I need like 4 pages of it, type of stuff. So I think there's it's a constant thing we're always going to have back and forth.
Yeah.
I don't know. I think the AAR piece. What's the one thing everyone says about AARs that's always in there?
Communications.
Why is that?
Yeah, literally, why is that?
For a living as an interagency coordinator, it's I recently was helping with a delegation that came from El Salvador that was kind of getting a whirlwind tour of the city of NYPD's abilities, FDNY, and just kind of they were seeing the EOCs at NYSM and Fire Department Operations Center and all this stuff. Now in El Salvador, they don't have those resources, right? And they were, asking me like, how do you coordinate this and this? And they're looking at these multi-millions of dollars worth of stuff. And I had a chance to talk with the group, and these are, some chiefs and their, their version of FEMA, a rep from there. And I said, and I'm standing in front of them, and I said, everything I need to coordinate just about any incident is on my person right now. And they're looking at me, and I'm in my emergency management uniform. And they're like, what do you got? So I pull out my cell phone. I pull out a portable radio out of my cargo pocket. I said, between those and my mouth talking, I said, I could go with you to El Salvador. If you translate for me, there's really very little I can't help you coordinate. Just the ability to communicate with these tools. You give me a radio that works for you, and we can work this out. Why is it that we're struggling with communication like this? And I think it's because we silo naturally.
Right.
In our realm. Everybody's got their focus, and that's what they're doing. And that you gotta scale back and kind of get up there and kind of look at the whole picture, and just be hey, John, what do you need? We haven't chatted. What do you need? We love talking about we should be exchanging business cards before the job. Okay, what are you doing with that? Are we just doing a meet and greet?
Yeah.
Are we actually learning about the agency and the person and their needs and the kinds of things they need at different types of incidents? Because that's where the communication comes in.
Can I just say that it's so unrealistic to think you could possibly meet every single person that you need to interact with.
Right.
And if somehow you didn't, that you can't work together, how bad are you at your job where you can't meet somebody new in a disaster? Don't get me wrong. You got to learn other people's job. You got to meet people. I'm a big fan of networking. That's like how the world goes around.
Well, majority of the time, you're not going to know them.
You're probably not going to know them, and when they show up, you're going to work together.
Agencies, and there's all sorts of other variables, and I mean, even after 4 years, I know there are plenty of folks in the different agencies we deal with, in the utilities and all that I know on a first name basis, and we have a good rapport. But there are more often, even after 4 years, I don't know the person, but it's how you approach it. You come in, it's like we're here, we're a team, we're going to solve this, and if everybody's on that page, it doesn't matter if you knew each other or went for drinks at the last conference. It really doesn't matter.
So the 2 or 3 problems here is, one, the reason why we have to exchange business cards so much, even with the EEM, is because without the standards of EM, you don't really know what you're going to get when somebody shows up. Right. If I call a fire unit, some kind of firefighter truck, whatever, some specific asset, I know what the capabilities are when it shows up. Same thing with law enforcement. Same thing. If I ask for an ambulance, I know what an ambulance looks like. If I ask for an emergency manager to show up, it could be anything. And that goes vice versa, them to us as well. So that's the first problem that we have to overcome. The second problem is, if I'm in charge and I see an AAR with communications on it, at this point, it's so embarrassing that somebody should get fired. Like, it is the job. Like,
it's what we do, quite literally.
Quite literally. Like, everything you do, you're interacting with somebody. And if you can't do that,
our job is to make that happen. Not just for us to communicate, but also to make sure that the involved parties are actually communicating. I'm not a decision maker. I'm not an enforcement agent. My job is to make sure that if the fire department's operating and the building department is there, that they're talking. And for us, very fortunately, that's most of our agencies. We everybody gets it. And I have to come in and just make sure it's kind of going the way it's supposed to go. But if they're not, if they're not communicating, or I see everybody kind of standing on different corners. Hey, everybody, can we get a quick interagency meeting going together? It's just, let's talk some things through. Let's see where we're at. Yeah, sure. And you come over, and a lot of times it's, people are surprised how often one agency had no idea that they couldn't do what they wanted to do because something else was going on and it was dangerous. They were just going to wander in like, whatever, I'm just going to go do what I do. And it's because we bring them together and force them to communicate, so to speak, and I'm not doing, all I'm doing is like, hey, fire department, where you at? What do you got? Okay, hey, does anyone have any questions for the fire department, any concerns, that kind of thing? And I go around the room, and I always start with whoever kind of owns the job. Sometimes it's fire, sometimes it's PD, sometimes it's buildings, sometimes it's a water main, so it's the water utility. But that's how you do it. And that's the communication. And then you link everyone together. You make sure they're exchanging business cards. And sometimes at the scene, that's the only place you're going to do it. And we make sure we've gotten people to start making a list of names and addresses and emails, because we might need the general contractor who's in charge of the construction of that building that caused the collapse. We're going to need to talk to them again.
I just realized you're the Santa of emergency management. You're checking the names, checking them twice.
Yeah.
Naughty and nice, following up.
Yeah.
Who are you giving cold to this year? That's the real question. The reality, and just like to summarize this, because we've been talking now for a little while, and I want you to come back on because we only talked about one disaster, but it was enough. Like, the reality is just like, we need, and I keep saying this on every podcast, so it gets probably so old for people, we need to get better. And there's enough data points. I challenge every single person who's listening to this podcast, for several thousand of you, if you're involved with AARs in 2024, do not use the word communications in there anywhere. Find the root causes of all the other problems, and actually
too broad.
Yeah, it's too broad. It doesn't mean anything anymore. It's you're talking about hard assets, or you're talking about people talking.
It's become a joke, really. Everybody uses it as a joke. Oh, well, communications will be in there.
Yeah, just don't use it. See what happens.
Yeah, advancing. I don't know, because we keep joking about the thing that's a problem and not addressing it.
That and continuous scope creep. The amount of people who've come onto this podcast or talked to me offline, come up to me at conferences. I've now have people come up to me at every conference, and I'm very grateful for that, by the way. And it shows that the guests that matter to them, they tell me that. But it's like continuous scope creep. It's exhausting. Mm-hmm. But everything you shared on here, I mean, you're a firefighter by trade, but you're also an emergency manager. You've learned this skill set of grit and innovation, and yet applying that to interagency coordination, thinking outside the box. What you're talking about technically isn't rocket science, but it's a whole lot of finesse. It's a whole lot of just be able to read the room and read the situation and be able to think. And we all
intelligence. There's
which I have none, which is a problem. But like, the reality is like, what we're talking about here matters. And I know I complimented you at the beginning and kind of in the middle. I'm going to do it again because I'm very serious and sincere in that. Like, we need to get better at doing what you do very well. And I want you to come back on this show. Maybe we can do like this thing next year of like the 10 tips of interagency coordination.
Yeah.
and just like rapid fire it. If you're willing to come back on, maybe
Oh,
something.
absolutely, yeah. Oh, I'd love to. And it's something that you and I were talking about offline about. There is a skill set that I have there that I recognized is I wouldn't call it uncommon, but maybe not as common as we'd like it to be. And I do like helping people, and I'm not searching fire buildings anymore, and I have to evolve myself. And I think the natural next step for me is to, like you're saying, kind of just take that skill set and figure out a way to pass it along, and maybe that'll help in some small way.
I think it's going to help in a big way. If anything else, if I don't have to see communications on any other AAR ever again,
That would be pretty
you
good.
made your mark. Yeah.
Yeah, for sure.
Hey, Doug, thanks so much for coming back on the podcast.
Thank you, John. I appreciate it, man. Always good to see you.
Yeah, of course. Okay, so everyone, if you listen to this episode, if you got something out of it, which you should have, you definitely need to get better at interagency coordination. Listen to this podcast again, take some notes, figure out how Doug is doing it. He's going to share 10 tips. I just challenged him to do that, come back on the spring, so we'll definitely get that done. Try to figure out what your 10 things are. See if they are the same when Doug comes back on the show. When you come out to disasters, how are you doing that interagency coordination? How are you working with people? Those things are so important for our field. You can save and sustain lives by being a major support around the people around you. A little bit of humility will go a long way. And with that, if you like this episode, you got to give us that 5-star rating and subscribe. That's how we know you liked it. If you have questions, if things are just really getting to you and you just got to figure this out, do ask us on social media. That would be the right place to do that. Open up those lines of communication. Gosh, I'm going to stop using that word myself. And we'll see you for the next episode. Peace.